we're all okay. We're all doing okay. In fact, we're all doing the absolute best we can do. And when we kind of come together that way, with from that sort of sense and understanding, like, hey, kind of hard to be a human a lot of times. We're all in this together. We're all seeing the best we can see and making the best choices we can see to make and doing the best we can do with things. If we all kind of saw that in ourselves and in each other, and this is where I think educational leaders really, this is our responsibility, right? Is like, this is what we do, is we see this in the people we're with, or we try our best to, like, so much just gets so much easier and better from that. People feel that.
Hello and welcome to EdTech and Pancakes. I'm your host, 𝐓𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸, and it is my absolute honor and pleasure to be featuring Dr. Amy Johnson on the podcast today. Dr. Johnson is a renowned psychologist, a coach, and author of best-selling books. She has helped thousands of people overcome anxiety and unwanted habits. I personally have benefited so much from Amy's materials. I know a lot of people have. She's been featured on the Steve Harvey Show, Wall Street Journal, and many other platforms. Our podcast, Changeable, is top rated, highly, highly recommended to anyone interested in mental health and personal development. Amy, thank you so much for making time for this and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Rosmic. It's great to be back and talk with you.
Yes, we had a chance to speak on other podcasts. We spoke a lot about personal development and understanding thought and navigating states of mind. And we'll do our best to focus more about on education, people working in education and students. So, but as a first question, please give us a brief background in terms of what sparked your passion to help people who are dealing with anxiety.
Yeah, my own experience really. So I just have always been interested in how people work and how we feel and why we feel and how all of this comes together. I mean, even as like a little kid. So I think, I think in a lot of ways, I went into psychology so that I could like figure out my parents and then later so I could figure out myself and which which I can't say that I figured out myself or my parents. Definitely haven't figured out my parents, and I have not really figured out myself. But it's been a really awesome journey of just being super curious about not even just about psychology, but like how life works. And I love that, we're talking about education. I think the key in everything for me has been curiosity. And for sure in education, when we're learning and stuff, to have this sense of just curiosity, of not trying to know and prove so much, is just being totally open to like what's really here and what's really going on. So that's something that I've been passionate about forever.
That's beautiful. There's already so much in your first answer. So the approach that you share is kind of described as a no willpower approach, an approach that is based on facilitating insight versus effort or premeditated steps. So for people that may not be familiar with this at all, please give a brief background in terms of what this means and how they can benefit from this perspective.
Yeah, it really ties into the curiosity bit. It's kind of coming from the framework rather than the way traditional psychology might, or a lot of fields that look at something like this is a problem we need to solve. Now, what are the steps to solve this problem? Um, it's kind of flipping that on its head and saying, hey, humans get confused and we feel this thing we call anxiety and we get caught up in things in life, and what if that is not a problem that needs to be fixed and solved? But what if those experiences just serve to wake us up, to get us curious about what's actually happening? So I don't mean that in kind of a Pollyanna sort of way, like, oh, your problems are your gift, although I think they are. But it's almost like what's right here, right now in real time is all there is. So let's explore it. Let's lean into it. It can be a portal to see more. So So that's kind of what I mean by insight rather than willpower. It's not coming with a framework of let's make this thing go away. It's coming with curiosity, really, about like what is there for me to see and learn here.
Beautiful. And this fits perfectly with the philosophy of our podcast, too. We have coined it as a podcast about paradigm shifts in education. And the thing about paradigm shifts is it just happens when we gain a fundamental understanding about how things are already at play. And then the engineering part easily comes on top of this.
Mhm.
So, in terms of understanding, what do you think are some key facts about how the mind works that would be helpful for any listener to be or become aware of, but especially people working in education?
I think it's a great question. And even how you phrased it about how the mind works. I think there's just something in there to see. Like in a way, that's how we would ask the question. That's what we're curious about. But even that, I feel like reflects this massive bias toward the mind and thought and intellect, which we take to mean something that comes from the brain. Like you have intellect and I have intellect and they're different and and it's separate and it belongs to us in some way. And I think to just keep widening those definitions and how we see this stuff, so it looks to me far less like there's a you and a me with our own separate knowledge and intellect, and more like we all have this shared essence, and there is intelligence in everything, and there's a resonance with it, there's a tapping into it. In a sense, it's known through thought and knowledge at times, for sure, but it's also maybe even more so known through the felt sense and our emotions and our common sense and the way that we just find ourselves doing things. I mean, the intelligence that animals have, that ants have, and all kinds of other animals that we would not consider intelligent. I mean, of course they're extremely intelligent, they just have a different intelligence from us. And so that, I feel like, is just a huge kind of starting point with this. So we're so lucky that we do have these thinking minds, and they add a lot, but they also get in the way at times and make things a little confusing. And when we can kind of put a little more balance to all that, I think it's just super helpful.
So the understanding that you're referring to has benefited both me and a lot of people that I know. And for me, for example, one of the most important parts was really starting to understand what feelings are actually pointing to and what I can therefore do with this information instead of trying to just overcome it as soon as possible, or if it's negative, transcend it or turn it into a positive thing. So, for the listeners, what can you share about the role of feelings in your approach and what insights would be helpful, especially for people working in education?
Yeah, I think I love what you're pointing to there about this distinction between, or this way that we're used to wanting to like fix and transcend. It's kind of like we said with the insight versus willpower. That's all starting with some assumption that there's a problem. I don't or even just I don't like this. I don't like this feeling, so I need to do something to make it go away. And I just like, what if there's no problem? What if everything that's arising is just arising to be seen and felt and curious about and examined? Um, so I think that's a huge difference. That feelings and uncomfortable thoughts, who knows what the difference even is. We say feelings are something we feel more in our body, and thoughts feel a little heady, but really they're hard to distinguish, and they can both be incredibly uncomfortable at times. But to kind of see that all of that experience, this energetic experience, feelings, thoughts, it just moves. It just it just has a life of its own. It comes up, it is brought to life, it moves on, it always has. And there's a real like peace and ease that starts to come from being in the flow of what's showing up, and just nothing, like we don't have to do anything with it, just being in the flow of what's showing up, which comes when we see, oh, this doesn't mean anything about me and it's not a problem I need to fix, as opposed to, like you mentioned, I don't like this feeling, I don't like this thought, I need to fix it and change it. That just gets us so in the middle of what's already wanting to move. So it's a huge thing about how the mind and how the feeling system works, that feelings are just, we feel everything. We feel every thought that shows up. We feel sounds. I think there's an energy, there's a vibration to everything. You taste something delicious, you feel it in your body. We feel emotions, everything is felt. And and that's just being human. That's amazing, and none of that is a problem we need to step in and fix.
That's profound. And this reminded me of a quote by Sydney Banks, which was, if the only thing people learned was not to be afraid of what they feel, that alone would change the world. And I think there is quite a lot of a misunderstanding in terms of what is psychological maturity, or I think we sometimes mistake it to be, oh, I will have more positive experiences, versus it seems like what you're pointing to is it may be much more about really not being afraid of what we feel and not minding what is.
Yeah.
So productivity is another buzz topic discussed in, let's call it, industry of personal development or mental health, but it's not always connected to the idea of wellness or the idea of just mental clarity. What do you think, especially in an educational context, what do you think are the key variables that influence productivity, especially when learning, or the quality of learning?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, this is a very simple, general way of saying it, that when humans are just being as we are, which I know that can bring up all, like, what does that mean? But when we just are as we are, there's no pressure. There's not a ton of thinking saying, again, this is wrong. I should be feeling something else. I need to get somewhere else. I need to do more. When all of that psychological stuff is at a minimum, when we are at our most relaxed, at our most peaceful, just as we are going to be at our most productive, without question. We're clear. Now that doesn't mean we're running around pulling all-nighters, doing a bunch of stuff. That's kind of what you're pointing to, I think, where productivity doesn't necessarily fit with health and wellness, right? So we can be productive in sort of a traditional sense and not be healthy or well at all. And we could probably really question the output of that productivity and the quality of it, if we really look at that. So that's one thing. We can run ourselves around, and that's not really what we're pointing to here. It's more that, yeah, when we're in this clear, relaxed, like when we're just being as we are and there's just not a lot in the way, our clarity is at its peak, our quality is at its peak, our productivity is at its peak. What truly feels like it wants and needs to be done in that moment will be done with a minimum of effort compared to other times. So that's probably not news to anyone listening, but it's like, it's so ironic how it feels to me like people hear that and they, oh, that's right, that's great. So how do I relax? Tell me all the steps now to relax and let my thinking go, which adds a whole other task, you know. And I think what's so big and what we point to in this is like just seeing like, no, that's the default state. We can quit adding. We don't need to add so much. It's the default state. And it becomes even more of a natural default the more we start to see how thought and feeling work, that this stuff is safe, that we don't have to fight it and steer it and manipulate it. It's like so much of our effort and energy just gets to fall away. And from there, humans are just incredibly productive. We are doing creatures, like we want to do and we want to participate in life. And that's a fear that a lot of people share. It's like, oh, if I relax too much, I'll just sit around and relax forever and I won't get anything done. And we can see where that comes from, because that's a mind that thinks it's running the show, that thinks, oh, I'm keeping all this going, and if I relax, then everything's going to fall apart. But in fact, it doesn't happen that way at all. You might need a rest for a while, but after a while, like, we are just so designed to be and act and interact and be part of the world that stuff will happen.
That's beautiful. I would even go as far as saying that we have this hidden belief that we think that we need to be somewhat stressed to be productive. I don't think we acknowledge that just that mental clarity and ease is going to turn into productivity in and of itself. Which brings me to this idea, and I started differentiating between things that are skills. So, like, let's say you're learning something highly technical, and you may actually need to put an intellectual effort or gather information to learn how to do it. But then, as you said, there are things that are innate. So when there isn't a lot of thoughts happening, it's like those things are flowing through us. So I want to ask you this. What role do you think educational institutions should play in terms of facilitating this type of an effortless connection with innate well-being, or whatever it is that we can call it? So how do you see educational institutions stepping in and really addressing mental health?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It feels like there's something around, something we can do to help people see that how much is working for them on their behalf. And I feel like innocently, no one really knows this in the big picture. So innocently, probably many institutions, the leaders don't see that themselves, because where would they have seen it when we're just not taught this stuff? And so it kind of comes at it, like, again, with this real seriousness, this real pressure, and this real sense of this stuff is super important and you need to learn it, and it's on you to learn it. And there's implied or not, sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly, there's this sense of the more effort and the more seriousness that you bring, the better it's going to go. And what we're saying here is the complete opposite of that. So I think it's really about, leaders, I guess, really seeing this, or somebody seeing it in that flip way, and being able to share with students and learners, like, you're designed for this. You're designed for this. You can follow your curiosity, you can follow your own energy. When it's time to sleep, sleep. It's not time to pull an all-nighter. When it's time to stay up late and study because you're energized around it, great. Like, there's a bigger flow of life that's guiding all this, and we are learning creatures. We're just wired to learn, and especially when that learning is kind of aligned with our natural interests and our natural curiosities. And that's where it feels to me like I see this with my kids, even who are in like middle school, like young teenager age. There's so much, and I understand it, but there's so much that's given to them at that age that they're not interested in, because we want to expose them to everything. But it's hard. You can just see like how just one subject is such a struggle and another is totally not. And the whole way of learning and being in it is completely different, so naturally, totally naturally. Um, so yeah, I feel like if we can kind of flip that paradigm and help people see that they're designed for this, then everything's just going to be so much easier, so much better.
Beautiful. You are also a mental health educator, and some of your programs, like the Little School of Big Change, they're fully online versions or somewhat hybrid versions where people can have conversations with you or get coaching sessions. What do you think about this medium of online education or hybrid education, and how do you think it's going to evolve over the next 5, 10 years?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I don't know how it's going to evolve. It sure seems um like a lot of people love it, but then it seems like people are kind of just finding their own way. And when I say people, I mean that's how it feels, is it's very individual. And even and it's not even about a person. Like, in one subject, in one topic area, in one area, you might be great with online, and then somewhere else you want to be with people. So I think just to have that flexibility, again, to kind of empower everyone to see, no, you have your own common sense about this and you can trust it. You can trust how you best learn. Don't let anyone else tell you that. And of course, we can't know for anyone else, but we can give them the space to see how they best learn. So I think when it's done like that, it sure seems like, wow, this is going to be amazing, because we have more options and more possibilities. Of course, if it starts to look like there's one better or worse, and now we need to pick and choose, then it could also, like anything, it also could become more of an issue. But overall, yeah, I think just having the options open to people is great.
Beautiful. And you have been conducting coaching sessions and working people remotely for a long time. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, do you feel like when you are having a call with somebody over Zoom, because coaching is such an intimate thing, so that connection and the feeling of listening to each other can be absolutely important. Do you feel that there's a major difference when you're speaking with somebody over Zoom?
I don't, but again, like you said, I've been doing this for so long, it's just kind of what I know. Um, I feel like this, especially Zoom with cameras on and all of that, I feel like it's amazing. And you're still getting all the yeah, body gestures and the facial feedback and all of that kind of stuff. And for many people, again, it makes them even more comfortable. So that's really what's, I think, ultimately important. Like, where is the student thriving, or in our case, where is the client thriving? Like, if my client is thriving in this conversation because they're in their own setting and they feel more comfortable, that's only going to make things better. How would I know, otherwise? But then again, like we were saying, um, I do a little bit of a hybrid, and there's always people who are like, thank God you're doing a live event and I need to be with people, and then other people who are like, what? I don't get that. So personal.
Beautiful. I'm very curious to hear about your approaches to communication and marketing as well, because you essentially have products that you sell and you're creating so much content just for free. How do you think your background in psychology or your understanding of the three principles, we haven't mentioned that name, but this understanding that you've been referring to is often referred to as the three principles. How has this impacted the way you market your products? And I'm also specifically asking this question from the perspective of universities, where because it's a dual thing, you want to help students make the best decision in terms of the best choice of career for them at the right setting at the right time, but you also want to somehow push it and bring people to you. So how has this impacted the way you market yourself?
It's a good question. I think what I've seen over time for myself is it is so much about fit. Like, when I first came across the three principles and all of that, I was like many people, I was like, this is the way and this is amazing. And it was for me, and it is an amazing way for many people. But I think there's been a natural softening of that, to where it's like, hey, let's just feel this out. Let me show you the strengths of this approach and how this works and what this has to offer. And then you see how that fits for you and how it feels for you. And when there's that great fit there, we're all going to be super happy. And I feel like it's probably similar in education, where an institution can be an amazing institution, but it's definitely not for everyone. So it's kind of like to our benefit, to everyone's benefit, um, to kind of just share, like, hey, here's our strengths, here's where we're coming from, here's what we do really well, and if that's a fit for you, awesome. And just, in my kind of programs and in education as well, we can't promise outcomes. Like, that's a big part of the marketing thing. It's like, I can never know what's going to happen for a coaching client exactly. All I can ever do is share what I've seen, what tends to happen, what's possible maybe. And then that won't be the case for some, and that's, I think, the same in education. It's like, you can have the best institution ever, but we don't know what's going to happen, and that's all. That's okay. Like, that's for people to kind of go on their journey and have whatever experience they have, even if that looks like what they might call a failure or leaving or something. That's part of life sometimes.
That's beautiful. So in terms of communication, I feel like what you pointed to in the first part of the episode, especially coming to terms with uh, how the mind really works, can help us just relax into what is and not mind it. And I feel like what can happen after that, when we somehow get used to that, we are able to pay better attention to other people's state of mind, somehow get clues, whether it's through body language or something else. So how have you noticed how this has impacted the way you communicate with people beyond your mental health practice and coaching sessions?
Yeah, it's very much more, um kind of like you said, like we were saying in the beginning, it's more just based on feel. And that's very hard to talk about because there's no real framework or words that fully describe it. But there is just, I feel like just in general, maybe a way to talk about it is the mind is just very linear, black and white. It knows or it doesn't know. And as we kind of come to see more about how the mind works, but also kind of connect more in the felt sense of life and live from feeling a bit more, the black and white linear no don't know machine just gets a little less attention, and this bigger kind of sense, like it's just has a wisdom that the mind does not have, of just, hunch or common sense or just an inkling about something, or we know things that we shouldn't know. We know without knowing how we know. So much of that instincts, that stuff kind of comes more to light. And I think initially for people, like everyone has this, I mean, it's just how we operate. The only thing going on, I think, is whether attention is primarily in thought and in linear stuff or not, or in this bigger field. So when we just kind of let attention shift down into the body and we're just with someone and we're open to other things, the mind won't be able to make sense of it. But who cares? That doesn't matter. It doesn't have to. You still know what you know.
Beautiful, very beautiful. So you speak a lot about unwanted habits and some of the habits that are and procrastination, for example. Although as I was sharing this, I don't necessarily consider procrastination a habit that needs to be overcome. I think of it more as a side effect of a specific state of mind. But let me just ask a more general question. What do you think is most misunderstood about overcoming habits?
Hmm. Um, that they're a problem. And of course they look like a problem, and they do. Some habits especially cause problems in our life. So it's not to say that but we're so myopic about it. Like, this is bad, this is a problem, it needs to go away. That mindset is the biggest misunderstanding and the biggest obstacle. There is no bigger obstacle. If it's like, no, this is bad and it has to go away, we're in trouble, because we just are tunnel vision and we can only see one. Like, we're just not going to see anything. So of course, when people come to me with a habit, I also, especially if it's a, painful habit, it's causing problems in their health or their life, I hope it goes away too. But we're coming at it with curiosity, from that sense of like, wow, what's going on here? What's really going on? And when someone can just have that bigger curiosity and lean into the feelings that they call my habit, and be curious about what's actually playing out here, and watch the stories and beliefs that their mind spits out about it and all of that, and be curious about what this habit is helping them distract from and cover up from and all of that, man, it not only blows open the habit, but it shows them so much about life and how we work.
Beautiful. There's just so much. And again, there are so many interesting pointers in what you're sharing, and I feel like we could pick them and go into so much detail about it. But since we also have a limited amount of time, maybe just the last few questions. If you, so there are educational leaders listening to us, admissions officers, I don't know, deans. If there is one insight you would want all these experts to walk away with from today's conversation, what would that be? And I know this is not a fair question, but I'm asking it anyways.
Oh, um, yeah, one insight. I don't know how my words are going to articulate this, but it's just a feeling of like, we're all okay. We're all doing okay. In fact, we're all doing the absolute best we can do. And when we kind of come together that way, from that sort of sense and understanding, like, hey, it's kind of hard to be a human a lot of times. We're all in this together. We're all seeing the best we can see and making the best choices we can see to make and doing the best we can do with things. if we all kind of saw that in ourselves and in each other, and this is where I think educational leaders really, this is our responsibility, right? Is like, this is what we do, is we see this in the people we're with, or we try our best to, like, so much just gets so much easier and better from that. People feel that. That's the thing when I work with clients and I train coaches to work with clients, like, the number one thing in our work that I help these future coaches see is like, the most important thing is like us seeing the health in our client. And that's hard sometimes if your client is coming initially, especially if they're coming and they're severely depressed or have anxiety or have an addiction. It can be hard to see the health in that. But when we know, no, this is a person that is afraid of a feeling, they picked up this habit because they're just innocently afraid of a feeling. And let's turn it back on us. Are you afraid of a feeling? I am. Like, everybody is. And so, like in education, again, like, people will procrastinate or be afraid or have a block here or be super anxious and serious over here. And all of that, in a sense, is kind of like a coping mechanism. Everything we do is a coping mechanism. We just want to be at home in our life. We just want to be who we are. We want people to recognize that we're healthy and see how we can thrive. And when it kind of goes from the top down and we can have that perspective and we can see no matter what a person's displaying with, that's the best they can see in this moment. I feel like that would open up and change so much.
Beautiful. That's super helpful. Thank you so much, Amy, for taking the time to speak with us. And for all our listeners, I highly encourage you to listen to Amy's podcast. And there are a lot of other free materials on her website. We'll make sure to include it in the podcast notes. This is EdTech and Pancakes. I'm 𝐓𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐸𝐶. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.